So today we're going to go on to lesson 3, which talks about functions and equations and graphing. It's a little bit longer because we're going to talk about 3 new things, but in order to do it successfully, you really do need to understand each of those pieces. So bear with me. If you need to pause and get up and take a break in the middle, that's okay too. So I'm going to be starting on page 596 in your book. We're going to be talking about linear equations. Sometimes they're called linear functions. Linear means line. So every graph that you make today should make a straight line. If you get something that goes a little crooked or starts to curve a little bit, one of your calculations was wrong. Okay, they should make a straight line for every one that we do. The lines might slant a little bit differently depending on the situation, but they should still be a line nonetheless. Okay, so the first thing we have to talk about is a little bit of a change of idea. We were talking yesterday and the day before about using n and finding the rule, but they were mostly expressions. Today we're going to switch and use the same idea, but we're going to make equations instead. So we're going to have the letters x and y in it, and these are always going to start off with y equals. So we look at example 1 here. We can follow what we were doing yesterday. How do I get from my top line to my bottom line? Well, I could add 8, or I could multiply by 9. So let's go to our second situation and see what that is. If I do 2 plus 8, does that give me my y? No. If I do 2 times 9, does that give it to me? Yes. So I think our pattern is going to be times 9. Let's see. 3 times 9, that works. 4 times 9, that works. 5 times 9, that works. So in the past few days, you would have said n, and the rule is 9 times n. We're going to switch that now. This is going to be x, and this is going to be y, but it's going to say y equals 9 times x, because whatever the top was, I multiplied by 9 to get the bottom. So if this is now called x, we would do 9 times x, and that gives me y. This whole bottom row is y. So now we've written an equation instead of just an expression. Same steps, just a little bit of a different mindset. Okay, let's go down to the got it and see if we can practice on that one. So here, how can I get from 1 to 16? Well, I could add 15, or I could multiply by 16. So let's see what works. If I do 2 plus 15, that's not going to work. If I do 2 times 16, that'll do it. 3 times 16, 4 times 16, 5 times 16, x times 16, right? So if this is x, this is 16 times x. But remember that I need to start off with y equals. So the bottom row, y equals, all of these are y's, y equals 16x. Now, there's a lot more to it than that, but if you can just make that mental shift and get x and y in each one of your equations today, that's really all you need at the moment, okay? We're also going to make the shift into taking the chart and making ordered pairs. If you remember when we graphed, you have an x comma y, x is your side to side, y is your up and down. So if we were to make a graph of this situation, I would do 1 comma 16 and 2 comma 32. And those would be the dots that I would make on my graph. And of course, you do all of them going across. Those would be the dots that I would make on my graph that are going to form a straight line. Okay, so I'm going to go over to example 2 on the next page. It's done under here, but I want to walk you through. So there's 2 basic steps for this. 1, they're going to give you the equation, and you need to make a table of values. And then from that table of values, you're going to make the graph. All right, so let's start off. The book is going to show you with lots of columns. I like a real simple x and y. It's called a T-chart because it kind of looks like a T. Okay. For x, you can pick whatever numbers you want. You could pick a third, 2.9, negative 465. I'm going to caution you, though, you usually only have a very small piece of graph paper. So I would pick reasonable numbers, maybe like 0, 1, and 2. And I'll show you an example in a minute where you might actually change those up to fit the equation that you're given. But for our purposes right now, 0, 1, and 2 are always safe bets. Right? Now, if my equation is y equals 2 times x, x is 0. So what's 2 times 0? Well, now x is 1. What's 2 times 1? And now x is 2. What's 2 times 2? So each one of those, and I'll write it out over here, each one of those, I kept my equation, and I replace the X with whatever I picked for my chart. Okay, so now I'm going to make ordered pairs. This becomes 0, 0. This becomes 1, 2. And this becomes 2, 4, right? Our X and Y from graphing. Now, let's see if I can move this and keep this on here at the same time. When we graph it, that's what it looks like. So here's my over 0, up 0, make a dot. Over 1, up 2, make a dot. Over 2, up 4, make a dot. And then connect them through. It made a line. It's a linear equation. All right, let's go to the got it and try this now. So we're going to make our T-chart, X and Y. Pick any numbers that you want. I like 0, 1, and 2. They're small. They're easy. So now it's going to be 0 plus 1, 1 plus 1, and 2 plus 1. There I've made my ordered pairs. Didn't write them as ordered pairs, but they'll turn into it. All right, we can do the same thing here. You give it a shot. Pause the video, and when you're finished, come back and unpause and see how you did. So I'm going to pick 0, 1, and 2. I could pick out other numbers, but those are easy. They get the job done. You need to have at least 3 numbers, 2 to make a line, but 3 guarantees you that they're right. You can't do it with just 1. That would give you 1 dot. That's not enough to make a line. So 3 times 0 plus 2, that would be 0 plus 2. 3 times 1 plus 2, that would be 3 plus 2. And then 3 times 2 plus 2, that would be 6 plus 2, or 8. The only thing that changed was the X, the number that I picked. Now, if you were going to get silly, because I know you're going to, and you picked like 48, then you would do 3 times 48 plus 2, 120 and 24, 144, 146. I don't think that's going to fit on my graph paper, especially if I have to come all the way down here to these small numbers. Okay, that's making the table, and then you would make your graph from that table. But sometimes they give you the chart, the graph already done, and you need to make the table. Well, this is even easier. There's no calculations. You just have to be able to read a graph. So where my number starts here at this dot, the X side to side was 1. And that went up to 42. So my first dot would be at 1, 42. Then I'll go to my second dot. It looks here, sometimes if you take a piece of paper or a notebook or something and line it up, it helps you see that. It looks like I went over to 2, and then I went up to 44. And then if I kept going, when I got to 3, it looks like I had to go up to 46. So you were given the graph, and you've now made a function table. Let's try one more. Turning the page. Here is one more example. So they've given the graph here. They've even set up the chart for you, told you that X is the magazines, Y is the total amount. Pause the video, do this, and then unpause and come back and check. So we went over 1 and up to 20, over 2. Now I'm going to have to estimate here. That looks to me like it's about 25. Over 3, up to 30. Luckily, that landed right on the line there. And then over 4, up to, I'm going to guess 35. My pattern stays the same, so my estimate seems reasonable. Now, one other thing I wanted to talk about. If you're given something like this, we know that 0.5 is a half. You're allowed to pick any numbers that you want for your X. You might want to not torture yourself and pick numbers that are going to cut in half nicely for a situation like this. Okay, so instead of doing my normal 0, 1, 2, I might pick 0, 2, 4. Because then when I go to take half of 2, I'm not going to introduce a decimal into my problem. You can do 1, you can do 3, you can do 47. But if you can avoid those situations, be kind to yourself and try to pick numbers that are going to play nicely with the decimal that you're given.